Good day, the students. In current lecture, we need to discuss few viruses, few groups viruses, which have crucial significance in Earth scale, and they're extremely important because they're causing or establishing life-threatening and lifelong infections. It is first of all human immunodeficiency virus and a group of oncogenic viruses. So if you talk about HIV or human immunodeficiency virus, of course it is one of the most known viruses because of long-term consequences and significant impact in community. Virus belong to positive sense single-stranded RNA viruses. RT means reverse transcriptase viruses. It is unique family Retroviridae which have enzyme able to produce DNA on the basis of RNA. And that virus actually described as RNA, and it is RNA containing virus. But in some sources, especially if it's not really medical sources, that virus can be described as DNA containing because the main nucleic acid used by virus is DNA, but virion is RNA containing and genetic material present in virus is RNA. So retroviridae, retro mean backwards, it is due to that reverse transcriptase enzyme. And virus belong to the genus of lentivirus. Lenti means slow, and it indicates slow progression of disease because actually after first episode of infection, years and sometimes even decades required to establish serious infection in human body, and disease for multiple years can be without any manifestation and can be latent. So of course, diseases are worldwide prevalent, and we have huge numbers and statistics about that virus. So according to a report of World Health Organization, at the end of 2019, about 38 million people were infected with that virus, and actually about 700,000 people died because of that infection only in 2019 year, and about 1.7 million people were newly infected. Of course, it is awful numbers, and the disease is hyper-endemic worldwide. And usually, disease, of course, is transmitted human to human contact, but we have natural reservoirs or hosts of viruses of immunodeficiency. It is wide range of animals, mammals, and mainly monkeys. So even if disease is known for decades already, we still have no cure for the disease. We don't have any vaccine for prevention of the disease, and disease is extremely difficult to control. So structure of virus is very complex, and actually HIV-1 and HIV-2 viruses, they're different in structure of antigens, and they have some slight variation in biological properties. But always we asking you the classic structure of the virus shown in that picture. So in the center of the virus, you can see genetic material, which is RNA, and few enzymes packed in the virion. It is reverse transcriptase, the main enzyme. Besides that, we have protease and integrase enzymes. And genetic material is covered by nucleocapsid, which is made of protein P24. So nucleocapsid is packed into matrix, which is made of matrix protein P17, and that protein coverage is enveloped, and virus is enveloped, and that envelope of course originates from human cells. Virus have several important glycoproteins. It is JP120 and JP41. They are located on the surface of the virus, and of course they're acting as antigens, superficial or external antigens. Besides that, virus have antigens for human leukocytes. They are named as human leukocyte antigen class 1 and class 2, and they have in general complex structure, but at least those enzymes should be named for you because they are essential in diagnosis of HIV infection and in replication of virus and infection of the human cells. So if you will search any information about HIV, of course, you'll find a lot of facts, a lot of data, So in common, disease is described as one infection, HIV, and no differences between HIV-1 and HIV-2 are provided because actually both viruses have a very similar genetic structure, common structure, and biological properties are very similar. But first thing, HIV-2 is usually confined in Africa countries, while HIV-1 extends in other countries worldwide, Europe, America, and Asian continent. HIV-2 is naturally characterized by lower transmissibility, means that it is more difficult to become infected with that virus than with HIV-1, and rarely it is progressing to AIDS. Usually infection with HIV-2 is late and slow, and it is only infection without any clinical manifestation and serious damage for human health. Again, HIV-2 usually characterized by progression at higher amount of CD4 counts, progression to HIV. But again, in our continents, usually HIV-1 infection is prevalent. Some questions, frequently asked questions about HIV virus by doctors, by students. First of all, of course, the question is, disease became known recently. So does it mean that we didn't have that virus before? It is something new and newly discovered, or maybe it is something exists for centuries, but we just didn't know and we had no options to diagnose the disease. So of course that question is difficult to answer. Only recently some studies or analysis of genome of virus and comparison of the genome with other viruses showed that it seems like HIV virus appeared in human population about a century ago. So someone between 1920 to 1940. Before that, that virus was not present in human community. So yes, it is quite recent virus. It is fresh virus, and for microorganism, a century is actually nothing. So second question, of course, if that virus was not present in our planet more than a century ago, how did it appear? Is it something synthetic or artificial virus produced by some country's biological weapon? Or of course, we had a lot of theories that HIV infection is not exist. It is only kind of fairy tale from governments to make people scary. So for sure, virus exists. It is a real disease now. It is obvious, and we have no doubt that it is virus of biological origin, means it is natural virus. And again, analysis of genetic structure and phylogenetic tree shows that that virus of human immunodeficiency is very similar to simian immunodeficiency virus. SIV virus naturally circulate in monkeys, and we have two different types of viruses in monkeys as well. One is identified in chimpanzee, in large monkeys, while second one is identified in smaller monkeys. And both viruses have very similar genetic structure with human viruses. So it is the theory, and it's most likely that monkey's virus was transmitted to human one, and in some time point it mutated and became human one. So we talk already that viruses can change host specificity by mutation in receptors, and it seems like simian virus mutated and changed host and became dangerous for human. So first it will explain why we have two different types of virus in human, HIV-1, HIV-2, because initially we have two different viruses in monkeys. So again, a question how virus can be transmitted from monkey to human if we don't have any close contacts with those animals. They are not kept as pets. We don't use them in some food industry or other. So we don't use those animals, and in our continents it is rare animal. But actually, again, if you take Africa and African countries, very few animals are living here which can be used for food either by native citizens. And it is known and it is confirmed that native African people used monkeys for food and for different rituals, for cult religions for different purposes. They used fresh meat, fresh blood to wash and became stronger to take the power of the animal. Some of them just didn't know how to cook and they ate fresh animals. And that virus was in contact, native virus of monkeys was in prolonged contact for centuries with humans. And at some time point it mutated and became dangerous for us as well. So how virus spread from human to of Africa to our countries, and actually if that virus was present in African countries for centuries while it is appeared here only now. So first of all, of course, Africa was closed continent for prolonged time period because everyone was afraid of aborigines on that continent. They were quite aggressive. Some of them can eat humans, and of course, very low amount of contact was registered for that continent. But of course, it is known that slavery was became a common measure in some countries in USA and in some European countries. And Africa people were delivered here in our continents, and with them we brought the disease. And of course, when a lot of more and more people came here, more contacts with our population appeared, and virus became hyper-endemic in our countries as well. So we have a lot of data and again a lot of numbers, different numbers. So officially, since the first report in 1970s, about 75 million people became infected, and about 35, almost half of them already died. So mortality rate in the case of HIV is really high. It can reach up to 50% without proper treatment. Of course, the disease is incurable, and lethal outcome is mainly the only possible outcome if person will not die by some any other reason. So still we have Africa is the most affected continent, and main number of people infected with HIV are still living here. HIV infection is the state when subject is infected with the virus, but no clinical symptoms appear. Clinical manifestation of HIV infection is known as AIDS or acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. So initially, when subject became infected, virus is latent and present in few amount. It needs to adapt to new host. It will multiply, but it's present in low amount, and clinical manifestations are absent. So after infection, virus will affect cells containing CD4 receptors, class A differentiation 4 receptors on the surface of our cells. And usually the highest amount of CD4 receptors are found in immune cells, T helpers, macrophages, and dendritic cells. So infection of the cell with that virus will lead to death of the cell. And of course, while amount of alive cells in our body is sufficient to perform immune functions, people will have no problems with the health. But when cells will die in a significant amount and our bone marrow and other organs cannot compensate lost cells, then immune functions will be lost, mainly cell-mediated immunity will be impaired, and subject will suffer from concomitant infections because of decreased immunity. And that state is known as AIDS. So actually it is the same disease, HIV infection and AIDS, but different stages of the disease. So the main clinical manifestation of AIDS is appearance of infections. We call them opportunistic. It means that those infections cannot be observed in a healthy subject because naturally cell-mediated immunity can clear those infections. But when cells are dead, destroyed, and they cannot perform proper immune response, then those diseases will appear. Usually those diseases are known as indicator diseases, means they indicate presence of severe problems with immunity in those people. Of course, we can talk a lot about that disease, and common information usually is known by any person, even in non-medical university. Disease is transmitted nowadays only by human-to-human contacts through blood mainly, but it is contagious with the semen and vaginal secretions, and can be transmitted from mother to kid through breast milk. We have multiple possible ways of transmission of the disease. Usually the most popular ways it is sexual contact or blood contact during medical procedures or paramedical procedures with non-sterile instruments. Drug transmission with the needles during drug abusing, IV drug abusing, and of course when disease was not very good known, blood transfusion and tissue transplantation were as well possible options for viral transmission. But nowadays, those ways are good controlled and very rare when virus is transmitted through some medical procedures. But again, we have risk factors such as concomitant sexually transmitted diseases. When we talk about herpes, we said that infection with herpes increasing chance of infection with HIV in 3 times or threefold. And of course, concomitant infections can increase transmissibility of the virus. So few cases with of transmission of virus with non-medical procedures such as piercing or tattoo are registered. And if salons are using non-sterile instruments, of course, those ways of transmission are possible as well. So initially, during the first contact with the virus, during the first infection, people can have episodes of infection which usually manifest with common symptoms of viral infection. We call them influenza-like symptoms. And only unique symptom is rashes which can appear on the skin. Few photos are provided here in the lowest part of the picture. People can feel kind of sore throat, lymph nodes can be enlarged and swollen. In more severe cases, people can have loss of appetite and weight loss, some fever and diarrheal disorders. But usually, first episode of infection will be missed because symptoms are not specific for the disease and people will not understand that actually they were infected with HIV infection. So after virus invades human body, it needs some time to adopt and to decrease amount of immune cells significantly, and usually few years, up to 15 years is required for HIV infection to progress to AIDS. And again, of course, we will not see that amount of cells decreased, but appearance of infections and certain cancers will indicate that some problems are present. And usually severe forms of tuberculosis, cryptococcal meningitis, or some cancers which already were discussed in previous lectures, Kaposi sarcoma or other, indicated for HIV infection progressing to acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. And of course, in that case, some people asking, is it possible to become infected through ordinary contacts, day-to-day contacts with people who are HIV infected, such as sharing food, drinking from the same bottle, or sharing personal objects. Of course, shaking hands and some hygiene will not lead to infection because it is always contact with the blood or some biological liquid. And drinking from the same bottle is usually not dangerous, but again, we said that it's not dangerous if subject have healthy gums. But if some problems in oral cavity are present, some amount of blood can get into that water or some object, and of course it can be easily transmitted to subject. Usually that amount is not sufficient to cause a disease, but of course it's better to have personal items and personal food and water sources, not to share them. At least in international level, it is said that it is fine and no problems with daily contacts are present. Of course, those people should not be avoided and they should not be scared, but personal hygiene should be still personal.